On.
Here to cover all things crime, history, and politics, we are at the desk. I'm your host, Lauren Perry, and in today's episode, we will be talking about the State of the Union, take a look at the history of the State of the Union address, and the recent shooting in Louisiana. Now, come take a seat with us at the desk. Welcome back to ATD. First, it's time to send it over to the politics panel to discuss the State of the Union. Over to you, Nikolai.
Thanks, Lauren. Well, the State of the Union addresses are typically given at the start of the year, but being the final politics panel of the semester, the panel thought it would be appropriate to do their own one right now. Tonight, the politics panel will be looking at the state of the Republican Party, Democratic Party, and go over interesting developments to look out for as we head into the summer. All right, folks, thank you for joining me. Let's start with the Republican Party and the state of the Republican Party. Would you like to go first?
I could go. All right, Christian, why don't you go first?
Yeah, I mean, look, the Republican Party is kind of, looking forward at the midterms. They have a difficult cycle coming up, and so they're going to have to fight to retain their seats and hopefully hold on to the Senate and the House. But moving beyond that, obviously, as we look forward to President Trump getting out of office and see kind of a huge shift in the Republican Party, and there's been a lot of talk about this civil war going on and who's going to win that, because it's undeniable that President Trump has really completely reformed the Republican Party and his image, changing its policies. You look back at 2012, it's completely different than it is today. And so I think the biggest question that we're going to have to answer going forward is, is the Republican Party going to stay this changed institution since the rising of President Trump, or is it going to go back, or will it turn into something new?
I mean, the Republican Party right now, like you said, it's like a civil war right now. And as we get closer to 2028, I have to wonder how many Republicans consider, if Trump's approval rating or if his general approval keeps continuing to go downhill, how many will start to not jump ship, but maybe kind of split with Trump a little bit? Like guys like Marco Rubio or J.D. Vance that have aspirations to run in 2028. I think Rubio's a lot more likely to do this, but they might see their whole time in the Trump administration, and unlike what Kamala Harris did in the 2024 election, they might choose to distance themselves from Trumpism, from MAGA, because the whole thing is once Trump is gone, what happens to MAGA? There's really no one there to carry on that flame in a way.
Yeah, I mean, both of what you're saying is 100% right. It's what happens after Trump. 2026 is not going to be a good cycle for them. Their goal right now is to hang on to the Senate. It looks like in every single poll that you look at that the Democrats are going to win the House of Representatives come the midterms. So it's what does 2028 look like? What puts you in the best position to do that? And the message that they had in 2024 was strong, although the Trump administration has not really tackled a lot of the topics that they did run on. But that message was a winning message. You look at some people, are we going to get back to more of a McCain Republican, a Mitt Romney Republican? There's a lot of outspoken people. Thomas Massie seems to be pulling away from Trump. Nancy Mace seems to be really outspoken. So there's some people that are starting to come out that still side with President Trump, but will distance themselves on some issues. So what are the voters going to be looking for in 2028? Is it a repeat of Trump and the MAGA movement, or is it someone who's a conservative, but more of the old conservative that we knew?
Yeah, the Republican Party is scrambling right now. Approval ratings for President Trump have gone so far down. They're really trying to find themselves, and that gives leeway for the Democrats to they have the wind behind their back right now. They're building momentum. People are excited to be Democrats, especially with Spanberger and the Mickey
Sherrill.
Yes, the New Jersey governor. Like, people are excited. Mamdani and his 2K childcare plan with Governor Kathy Hochul. Democrats are doing great things right now, and people are excited to be part of the party. And I think they're going to sweep the midterms.
They might do well in the midterms, but Spanberger is the most unpopular Virginia governor already in 4 months.
She does to kind of earn that in popularity, though.
I mean, I'm just saying what it says. She's the most unpopular person. The Democrats who are trying to get this redistricting thing passed today, and we still don't know the answer to it. It looks like it's going to turn out to be no. So I don't know.
Well, it's close. It's not like it's a landslide.
And it's
up in the air. We'll see.
It's up in the air, but she's not popular. Mikey Sherrill is not as popular. Mikey Sherrill's not as popular. New Jersey doesn't love her as much as you may think. And when you look at the Democrats and what 2026 says, I don't know if it's a knock necessarily on Republicans as a whole compared to the denial of Trump. You look at it, and actually Democrats are more unfavorable as a party than the Republicans at 28%.
Democrats are sweeping special elections right now.
Because it's not because of a approval of the Democrats more than it is. Most people are saying it's a denial of Trump,
People
and that's
are
the difference.
Switching over to be Democrats. People are excited, and even moves like James Tallarico, like he is bringing more of the religious conservative vibe into Democrats. Like Democrats. People, they're bringing everyone like we've never seen before. There's not just one type. Like everybody's energized about the party.
I don't think that's true.
I think the criticism of the Democratic Party is less about the party and how they handle. It's more about how they are responding to Trumpism.
I mean, yeah, they're winning, so it has to be true.
2026 is a full denial of what Trump and the administration is doing. There's not a clear message. We saw in 2024 that they had a losing message, and going into 2028, they still don't have a message. And Governor Chris Christie.
Message. There's one party that's working for the people, and there's one.
But that's not true, because we just saw the Biden administration a year and a half ago, and they were not doing a good job. Their approval rating was horrendous, and they lost in the election, and they lost all
things. They kept insulin at 35.
I mean, we can all tout each and every administration's wins, but they were very unpopular. And right now, Trump is making them more popular as it looks. But when you go, you have to say 2026, you can go after Trump all you want. But as I was saying, former governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie said it best. He said, why kill somebody when they're already going to commit suicide? And that's right. And that's what the Democrats should be doing. Governor Chris Christie, as a joke, actually said they should send everyone down to St. Lucia until November rolls around, because if the Democrats keep their mouth shut, then by the time 2026, they'll have a successful election. 2028 might be a different story, but they don't have to do anything. The Trump is doing it by themselves.
I mean, yeah, the Biden administration didn't drag us into an unnecessary unlawful
quickly
war.
Switch over now. We went over the Republican Party. Let's talk about a closer look at the Democrat Party and the state of them now.
Well, the Democrat Party, I'm cautiously optimistic about Democrats right now. I think you got a lot of people in the party that want to do good. You got guys like Zura, you got Kathy Hochul, Bashir is looking promising among others. But I think let's look back to last year. The Democrats kind of had a rebuke in the last election to Trump. They won all sorts of special elections in deep red states, deep red counties, things of that like. I think this year, they're very easily going to take the House, I think.
Yes.
I think there's no question they're going to take the House of Representatives. It's all about the Senate. I'm not sure if they'll take the Senate or not. But I think as long as the Democrats don't shoot themselves in the foot like they so often do in these situations, I think they'll be okay come midterm time.
Yeah, I think it is kind of a mistake to read into a lot of these elections and say, oh, well, this is because the Democrat Party is so popular now, because this is the historical law of politics, essentially, is that when someone gets elected president, their party suffers in the special elections that come immediately after that, because who is going to be energized? It's the people that hate President Trump or hate the person in power, because it goes both ways. Same thing happens in the midterm. Every single time, the president's party loses seats in the midterms. So I'm saying that is not really something to say, oh, well, the Democrats are doing really good. Because I think if you look at the record, they're really in a tough spot, because you have great people who are going out there and energizing people like Zoran, but you also have the Democrat Party trying to stifle him. So you have such a mixed message on the Democrat side, where you have people who are able to drive out voters, but they're shunning them or trying to kneecap them. And then you have other people who run as moderates, But then, you look at in Virginia or New Jersey, but then as soon as Spanberger got into office, she immediately put out a bunch of policies that contradicted what she ran on, especially, with the election that we have today, the referendum on the redistricting. She was advocating for the fair and unbiased map that they have currently. And then as soon as she gets into office,
Well, yeah,
she
but
tries
then
to change
Texas
that.
Yeah,
against the rules. So what are we going to do?
10-1 is crazy on a 6-4. But to your point, the Democrats, you see it right now. They have people that are potential candidates and someone that can energize people. And then that's what they needed. In 2024, there's so many people that even are registered as Democrats and did not come out to vote. They would rather not vote than vote for Kamala or Trump. And you see who's,
See if they have both good.
and we talked about this off air, and it's like, is the DNC going to push out at the top of this ticket right now? You see people like Governor Gavin Newsom, who's crazily unpopular in California. He has a lot of failures with homelessness. The homelessness is crazy. There's fraud. You're seeing it right now in California. The list goes on and on. Kamala Harris is another person who's very not popular. She already lost an election. The Democrats need to come up with a message that connects with the broader scope of America, things like the economy and the border, like the Republicans did in 2024, to get those people to get off their couches and go vote.
I wouldn't say Gavin Newsom's wildly unpopular. I mean, there's issues in every state, but
They have the highest homelessness rate. They have a high crime rate. They're right now actually.
Yeah, but he's energizing the party. He's like reaching out to the young voters.
He's doing the
bringing people
most out of
Yes.
any establishment Democrat right now to push back against Trump. But how far that goes past his
Absolutely.
social media account imitating Trump's posts, I'm not really sure.
He's also, you see it. He can talk a good game. That's right. That's why people think he's a good presidential candidate. And then you look at what he does actually when he has to do something with policy. And California is not in a good state right now.
I mean, the Democrats have been helping the working people. Like, they are the
that's
ones
the-
who are trying to save
that's-
workers.
I don't
They're
know.
helping-
I don't know
That
if
was the whole
that's
problem.
true,
And that was the whole problem with the Democrats in 2024 is that the working people turned on them. They really
Yes.
did. Unions went for Trump. Working people went for Trump. They went for the Republican Party. Democrats didn't do a good enough job getting the messaging across
But now
that
people can't
aren't
afford to live. They can't afford their
There's a-
gas. They
the
see
thing
these
is
reoccurring
that is
problems.
always
There's
going
one
to be
thing
a
that's helping.
problem for the Democratic Party, because if you look at the structure of their primary elections, it's very undemocratic. You have all these super delegates. Look what happened to Bernie Sanders in 2016. I mean, he essentially probably should have won. He was probably the most popular candidate, but you have all these super delegates that the DNC has where they're able to force establishment candidates. So there's no chance, because you look at 2020, you look at 2024, it's the same exact thing. They're not going to be able to have a kind of revolution like you saw President Trump carry out, where he was able to get the support of the people in the primary and win. You're not going to have that in the Democrat Party. So all these upstarts that are motivating people aren't going to be able to succeed in the Democrat Party, and that's where they're going to run into the problems. And that's why people keep turning back to the Republicans, because they're the only ones that actually can have some change in their party leadership.
Well, the Democrats, like you were saying about the superdelegates, they're kind of controlled by the donor class. Donor class controls them. I mean, that's why Kamala Harris got in after a questionable process when Biden dropped out. But it's really up to them who ends up running. It's not, the way I've seen it, it's not as much up to the actual Democratic voters in these primaries. I mean, we've seen it with Bernie Sanders. He probably was the most popular candidate. I think he would have beaten Trump in 2016 if they allowed him to get the ticket. But when you're looking at the current field, you got a lot of options. You got someone that's like has firepower, great on the debate stage, like AOC, but isn't popular enough, at least right now, to get her policy across. But then you have someone like Andy Beshear from Kentucky, governor of Kentucky, a Republican state, who has a good track record, is doing good things, easy to talk to. How he'll separate himself from sort of the moderate Democrats of past that have lost, like Amy Klobuchar or whoever, I'm not sure. But you got people in there who I think, even if the pick will end up being Newsom, I like the future of the party overall. I mean, I wanted to shout out to John Ossoff
Yes,
of Georgia.
I was just going to bring him up.
Ossoff is he's a great speaker, great orator. He's great in Senate Judiciary hearings.
Here's the problem with the Democratic Party, and it's not a knock on them. It's a knock on America and being so just prejudice and stereotype. You look at the top people in the Democratic Party. If they tried to run Pete Buttigieg, he's a gay man. You have Josh Shapiro, who's very popular, but he's a Jewish American. You have Wes Moore, who's African American. Kamala Harris, who's African American and a woman. Whitmore, who's Amy Klobuchar. I mean, the list goes on and on. They just have so many things that are going against them as their top people that unfortunately in this society that we're in with stereotypes, bigotry, and just hate and prejudice, I don't know if America will be ready for it. And that's a sad reality.
Yeah,
I mean,
unfortunately, I agree. And that's why John Ossoff stands out, Andy Bashir. Like, we need a white man.
Oh my God.
It's so sad, but it is true. But
Right.
also, I do feel like just Democrats in general, they have the wind at their back. They really do. And I feel like they have a lot going for them. So I feel like if they put forward a safe candidate, they could take hold in 2028. Because people are sick of not being able to afford to live.
I mean, but in 2020, in Biden's presidency, it also wasn't very affordable. They usually raise taxes. I
Not
know you
like
talk.
it is now. Look at oil.
Oil has been there
There's a lot
for
more
3
context
weeks. It was
behind
low
that.
until this instance, and it will go back down again, and it genuinely will. But life.
But this is a huge mess that was really unnecessary. But
It was the Iran war. If I think the Democrats' best option, if they're going to hammer the Republicans on one thing leading up to midterms, it would be this war, and it would be about gas prices, because this war is incredibly unpopular. And I think that there are a lot of young people that voted for Trump, that voted on the premise of no foreign wars and things like that, that are seeing this and they're sort of disillusioned. Do I think the Democrats are going to capture their votes? I don't know. I think it's more likely that they will show up, which is better for the Democrats either way.
All right, guys. Well, there's the two parties. Now we're going to look ahead to the summer. Politics will not be around for the summer. What are some interesting developments to look ahead for as we go into the summer?
I mean, obviously the Virginia referendum from tonight. We're going to see how that turns out. Any of the other redistricting moves are happening. I mean, redistricting is a controversial subject just because of the precedent it could set. But the whole point of it, the point they're doing that is because Trump wanted to redistrict Texas, and he wanted to redistrict things because he wants to kind of have a slant on this midterm elections. And you'll see that because there's a chance he might send ICE agents or federal agents to polling places come election time, which is illegal, but it's something he has floated many times. If we want a free and fair election, we need to not have that.
Well, I think the biggest story is going to be the Iran war. I know we've talked about that a lot, and that's going to be interesting. You know, the president just put out a post about, trying to extend the ceasefire, hold back, and kind of withdraw from the war. So we'll see if he's successful with that, because that's going to impact the
after he
midterms.
said he wasn't going to
That's-
extend it.
That's going to impact the midterms a lot, and seeing whether or not he's able to pull out or if they're find a deal. But even if he finds a deal, are we going to find ourselves in a situation where he goes back in, just like what happened last summer? So it's definitely going to be a contentious issue because they want to pull that down so that they can win in the midterms. But we're going to have to see if that's possible.
I'm interested to see who else drops out of his cabinet. You kind of see now every 2 weeks we're starting to see a new
Dropping
person.
like flies right now.
It's a new replacement, and we saw this in 2016. And we're seeing it again now. So I'm interested to see his approval rating going down and this foreign war being unpopular and some of his stances actually going against what he ran on initially. Who else is going to take their name out, especially if they have aspirations beyond the Trump administration to potentially be some type of figurehead?
And I think if this war dies down, I think the thing that will end up being talked about again and keeps being talked about over and over again is the Epstein files.
Yeah.
I mean, we
Yes.
keep saying it over and over again, but it's the one thing that Trump has never really truly been able to worm his way out of. And I'm interested to see how that kind of turns up leading the midterms and how the Democrats will take advantage of that, whether that's appropriate or right or not to take advantage of something like the Epstein files for political points is not really what I'm arguing here, but I'm excited, or not excited, I'm ready to see how that kind of comes back into the public frame.
Yes, first and foremost, the redistricting vote tonight is going to be huge to look out for. And then after that, people want answers for the Epstein files. People want to be able to afford gas. They want to be able to afford housing and groceries. And that's why I think the Democrats have a huge advantage. And it's worth looking at how they campaign and how they bring more people to the polls, because I think that's all they have to do. People are siding with them. They just need to get to vote.
All right. Well, we have to wrap up. I have to sadly report that this will be my last episode here on At the Desk. It's been more than a pleasure to lead this politics panel this year and to be a part of this panel for the past two. Coming here, having these conversations with these people, especially in our current political climate, has been the highlight of my week since I joined, and it's something I would truly miss. I want to say thank you to the At the Desk family for the privilege of being a part of this great show, and I personally cannot wait to see what all these supremely talented people, both in front of and behind the camera, have in store next season. This is Ryan from At the Desk, signing off. Back to you, Lauren.
Thanks, Ryan. We're sending it right back to Nikolai for a quick history of the State of the Union address.
On January 8, 1790, the first State of the Union address was delivered by George Washington. At the time, the address was referred to as the annual message. The State of the Union is an annual report delivered by the President of the United States. The address generally includes reports of the economy, news, presidential priorities, and legislative proposals. The address fulfills Article 2, Section 3 of the Constitution, which requires the President to give information on the State of the Union to Congress. The first address from Washington was delivered in person in New York City. However, starting in 1801 with Thomas Jefferson, addresses were no longer given in person, but instead, the address was written and sent to Congress to be read by a clerk. Jefferson saw in-person speeches as too king-like and too similar to the speech from the throne. This style of the State of the Union lasted for over 100 years until Woodrow Wilson brought back in-person speeches in 1913. Despite some initial controversy, the style stuck and in-person addresses have been delivered nearly every year since. The term State of the Union emerged in 1934 when Franklin D. Roosevelt first coined the term, and has been accepted as its general name since 1947. Before 1934, the address was given in December. However, the ratification of the 20th Amendment changed the opening of Congress from early March to early January. This affected when the speech could be given, and since 1934, the speech has been given early in the year. In 1922, Warren Harding gave the first address over the radio, while in 1947, Harry Truman gave the first address on television. And in 1997, Bill Clinton gave the first ever address on the web. The most recent State of the Union address was given on February 24th of this year by President Donald Trump. Back to you, Lauren.
Thanks for that, Nikolai. It's time to send it over to the crime panel to discuss the recent shooting in Louisiana. Over to you, Sam.
Thanks, Lauren. Tonight, we are going to talk about how a heartbreaking story out of Shreveport, where a mass shooting has left the entire world devastated. On Sunday, April 29th, 2026, authorities say 8 children aging from 3 to 11 years old were killed in what is called a domestic violence-related incident. The suspect, who was identified as the father of most of the victims, shot and injured 2 women before fleeing the scene. The pursuit ended with the suspect's death. So, a lot has happened recently. You know, after a meeting on Sunday that we had, I got a notification on my phone that this had happened. It is one of the most devastating mass shootings. So I just want to talk about it. So first, do you want to talk about the, background of the shooter?
Yeah, so the shooter was identified as Shamar Elkins. He was a 31-year-old Shreveport native from Louisiana. And a little bit of the background that we have on him, I'm going to be honest, kind of looking into it, we have a very limited amount of information right now. But so far, he is an Army National Guard veteran. He served from 2013 to 2020. He was in charge of signal support systems and fire support systems. He was a specialist in both of those areas. Basically, that just means he was in charge of troubleshooting, tactical communication, and also he was in charge of setting up enemy targets and helping with artillery support for the National Guard. It says at the time of the incident, he was a UPS and sanitation worker. It was shown in public records back in 2019. He was charged with a firearm incident. There wasn't a lot of information on what that incident was, but it was shown in his public records. Other than that, I mean, so far, a lot of his family members have kind of piped up a little bit, and they've said that, you know, he has never really been violent. He's never really had very many issues that they really know of. The only thing is that he has had a history of depression since he was probably around maybe like 10 to 13 years old. There are reports of him having really dark thoughts when he was younger, talking about fighting demons and kind of seeing darkness in his everyday life. One thing from his family home life is that his mother was a teen drug addict. So he actually was adopted and raised by their family friend, Betty Walker, and she acted as his mother and his legal guardian. But she said in a recent interview that she tried her best to give Elkins a very loving home, a very warm and welcome environment, and said that, you know, she raised him right and loved him as if he was his own. So one thing that is interesting is that 3 years prior to the incident that just occurred with his wife, Shaniqua Pugh, he actually said in a statement to her, "I will kill you, my kids, and myself," because they were going through a domestic dispute where they originally were going to try and file for divorce. Now, Pugh kind of wrote this off as her husband just kind of being upset about the situation, kind of joking around a little bit. But he did actually say that a couple years ago, which is very, very interesting and very notable. So that's kind of all of the basis information that we have on him right now.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting what you said. You know, the family kind of didn't have that many, you know, red flags and stuff like that, because a lot of domestic violence incidents happen behind closed doors. You know, authorities don't know about it. You know, friends don't know about it. So I think that's what makes this type of violence so impactful and harmful, and I think that's just something to note. So do you want to go over kind of what happened that day?
Yes, so as we know, the case is still ongoing. It just happened on Sunday, but I wanted to give an overall timeline so everyone's clear on what happened. The incident began at 6 a.m. on Sunday morning when Shreveport police officers were called about a domestic disturbance. Sources say that the gunman, Shamar Elkins, was arguing with his wife about separating. Shamar then shot her in the face and stomach. She had to undergo several surgeries, and she's currently in recovery. He then shot and killed the 8 children in the house. 7 of them were his own, and 1 of them was a cousin. Most of them were shot in the head while they were sleeping. News outlets also reported that a 13-year-old fled from the scene and jumped off the roof. He survived. He just has a few broken bones, but he's also in recovery. Minutes later, police received another phone call from a woman claiming that her boyfriend shot her. After both callers identified Shamar as the perpetrator, the police obviously connected the crimes. And after shooting his girlfriend, Shamar fled the scene and carjacked someone. Police chased him through Shreveport until one cop opened fire and died. Shamar died. The girlfriend is also in recovery. Sources say she's actually the mother of 3 of the children killed. And according to reports, this was the deadliest mass shooting reported in the U.S. in over 2 years.
I mean, yeah, so I kind of wanted to go into some of the psychology stuff. So obviously, this is being referred to as a family annihilation, which is rare, but it actually has happened before a couple times in the past. And it's a form of domestic murder-suicide where a perpetrator, almost exclusively male, kills all or most of their immediate family members, spouse, partner, children, and then goes on to kill themselves. It often occurs in a single incident, sometimes followed by the perpetrator's suicide. And it's frequently driven by domestic dysfunction, financial ruin, or separation. So as we saw, they were going through that kind of divorce and separation, and he obviously had been dealing with depression all of his life. And unfortunately, I'm sure that combination is kind of what sent him over the edge. And you know, these types of cases often follow a pattern. It goes from relationship breakdown to custody conflict, and then a perceived loss of control in the offender's life. So this perpetrator probably felt he had no more control over a lot of his life. He lost his wife. he probably lost most custody of his children.
Mhm.
So I think what's especially chilling here is that investigators are describing it as masked rage, which is someone
Wow.
who may appear outwardly normal,
Mhm.
but is dealing with intense internal distress. So I feel like that's especially chilling because from the outside, like there weren't that many red flags. I mean,
No.
he had a history of depression and emotional distress. I read somewhere that maybe he was in a hospitalization for treatment for his depression,
Mhm.
which is kind of a red flag. But other than that, I mean, he clearly was released from the hospital. So they deemed him as not a risk to himself or others. But I think it really also says a lot about the mental health system as a whole. I mean, he was potentially hospitalized for treatment, but then was released as not a harm to himself or others, but then went on to kill his wife, his children, and then his girlfriend.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that says a lot about the resources that we have for people struggling with mental health or the lack thereof. But
Yeah. And I think what's also important to note is, this kind of sparked when they were talking about, their relationship and where it was going. And it is known that the most dangerous part of a domestic violence situation is when, someone tries to leave. Because as you said, there's a lack of control. And that is why a lot of people don't try to leave. And I know I've talked a lot about in my classes that there's often a victim blame in this. They were in this domestic violence situation, like why didn't they leave? That's not the question we should be asking
No.
at all. And I think that really connects to, this case. I've seen a lot of questions on social media, like he had a wife, he had a girlfriend, why were they even in this situation? And I really don't think that should be the question asked at all.
I think it's also important to note that, like, going off of that question, like, this wasn't just like an impulsive, like, chaos, like mass shooting like we usually see. Like, this was goal directed.
Yes.
And every step of it had, like, he had a plan. He moved locations. He targeted victims. It wasn't like he just walked into a house and shot everyone. He moved from his wife's house to his girlfriend's house and then stole a car. Like, he had this thought out and it was a plan, which I think is very different from mass shootings.
Yeah. The fact that this stems from a domestic violence incident, I think it's important to highlight some of the domestic violence statistics. A 4-year study by the FBI was just released 2 months ago and found an increasing number of domestic violence cases, with more than 11,000 people in the U.S. killed by a domestic partner between 2020 and 2024.
Wow.
And since this incident occurred in Louisiana, it's interesting to focus on their data on domestic violence. So Louisiana actually has the 5th highest rate of women murdered by men in the United States. And they've been consistently ranked in the top 5 since 1997.
Wow.
Which I think
Wow.
is definitely important to highlight when we're discussing this case and analyzing domestic violence cases in the South and, the impacts that it has.
And I think this is good because it's not good, but social media is kind of like uproared about this, and I think it'll give a lot of attention to domestic violence situations because it happens all the time. Most people that are killed by somebody they know. And I think it's important when entering into a relationship. Police response has gotten better with domestic violence situations because a lot of the times the victims aren't believed, and there's a low conviction rate for these people. So, going to the police, like we were talking about, trying to leave may escalate a situation, which is often concerning.
And I'm hoping that, like, this will, now that social media has kind of seen this story and really like taken it to that next level, I'm hoping that it will help kind of point out some of the more internal warning signs, that aren't so outward, like his struggle with mental health and like the escalation of domestic violence. I hope that, like, now that social media has caught it, it will help kind of make some of these warning signs that are not always visible, maybe a little bit more, oh, this is what I should be looking for, that's not out as like outright.
Yeah, another thing kind of I wanted to highlight, just kind of piggybacking off of that, is, you mentioned something about like, mental health specifically in this case, like also want to highlight the importance of men's mental health. I want to bring a lot of attention, to that. And obviously I'm not saying, and we're not saying that if you are a man or a husband or, a father out there with depression, you're going to end up in a situation like this, committing acts of, domestic violence. No, that's not what we're saying at all. But I think that
definitely, you were talking about questions we should be asking is what could we have done to prevent this? What could we have done to not only, help Elkins, but, help his mental health in the situation that, he grew up in. A lot of the times men's mental health is not prioritized. It's often stigmatized, in society as, being weak. There's a lot of masculinization that is expected, from men in our present society. And a lot of times, a lot of men, especially, him growing up kind of being between 10 and 13, just starting to show signs of depression. He was scared to kind of, speak up. And I understand he didn't have the most stable home life, but he had, a trusted adult who he could have told, and he didn't feel, comfortable doing that. It's important that kind of when, young kind of boys and teens are going through that transition, that they get the care that they need. They get, a loving, stable environment where they can work through these issues, because mental health, it's an important, pressing issue for everyone in society.
I think him being a veteran also really adds to that too, because then it adds to this next level of, you're supposed to be tough. You're not supposed to show your feelings. And even then, there's so little veteran resources for the amount of veterans that the United States has. Maybe if he had access to one of the veteran offices, and who knows, he might have even had PTSD that was undocumented or diagnosed, because I think he had been internally struggling with his depression for so long that there could have been way more going on that nobody even knew about.
Exactly. And I agree with your point that men's mental health is often overlooked. And I think the fact that he did threaten to kill his wife and kids in the past, and that was just, overlooked, as we just said, and it wasn't taken seriously. And that's why it needs to be taken more seriously in the future. And we need to learn from this so cases like this don't continue to happen.
I think he people kind of see this, they said, he said, I'll kill you, my kids and myself, again, it wasn't taken seriously. His wife is kind of he's just saying things, because he wasn't an inherently angry, violent person. But that is a clear warning sign. That is someone asking for help who doesn't know how to officially be I need help. That's someone asking for help. That's someone who clearly doesn't know what to do.
Yeah, and also I feel like I was talking about before, law enforcement's response. They've gotten better, but definitely if someone heard that statement and they felt 100% I could be saved from the situation, maybe someone would have gone to the police sooner. Maybe he would have seeked out that help instead of, waiting until it escalated to that point. And I do think, though, it takes a certain type of person, mental health or not, to commit a crime as gruesome as this one. Traveling to different locations, killing all of your kids, your wife, your girlfriend, everyone close to you. Cousins. I mean, it's crazy. And I think there is, we were talking about men's mental health and those resources. And, in this case, the perpetrator was a male, but, women can also be perpetrators of these things. And I think that's, something important to look at. People believe, women can't be abusers, women can't this and that, but I mean, they can, and they can do it in a lot of different ways. And I think that's, a message that kind of needs to be brought out. And I think this case kind of, it's new. It just happened, but a lot more information is going to come out about this. Does anyone have any, closing words or anything they want to say before we end?
I think just the biggest thing is obviously, like we said, with a case as upsetting and as gruesome as this, it's really easy to just it's really easy to be obviously upset and be angry, but it is really important. Like we said, I think just, we as a society, as a government, we need to sit down and be how can we help? How can we stop these situations before they even happening, instead of just blaming the perpetrator for what happens afterwards? If we, got ahead and could have helped him, then this issue probably would have never have happened. And that's what's most important.
Yeah. So I think that's, this case, as I said, it's new, and also a lot of domestic violence research is new. It's starting to, become more common. People are talking about it more, but unfortunately, this is all the time we have for this panel. So as this investigation continues, many questions are still unanswered. Cases like this highlight the devastating consequences of domestic violence, and officials are now looking for anybody with any more information to come forward to truly piece together what led to this heartbreaking event. Back to you, Lauren.
Thanks, Sam. Sadly, that is all the time we have for today. In the meantime, stay updated with ATD on all of our socials at PSU at the desk, and let us know what you want to see us cover next. I'm Lauren Perry, and we will see you back at the desk next week.